Hi, my name is Nana, and I'm going to read you a story about a star. His name is Seymour, and he wanted to be a superstar. This is in Volume 3, and it is story number 7. The title of this story is A Very Sad Story, but then the time between Palm Sunday and Easter is called Holy Week. It is a time when we reflect on Jesus' life and what his love and sacrifice means to all of us. Seymour was out checking on all the festivities that was going on in the city of Jerusalem, where the Jewish people were coming to celebrate the Passover. There were lots of people. Suddenly, Seymour saw a parade. What was happening? Then he saw Jesus riding a donkey, and people were laying down palm branches, and some were even laying down their coats in front of him. People were yelling, "Hosanna!" It was a wonderful parade. The next couple of days were fun. Everybody got to visit with friends and family. Then Seymour began to hear mean things being said about Jesus by the religious leaders in the temple. They said Jesus was a traitor and he was not the Son of God. Seymour wondered, how could they say that? Hadn't they seen the miracles? They called Jesus a troublemaker. Jesus seemed to ignore what was being said. He wanted to celebrate the Passover with all his friends. So on Thursday, Seymour saw Peter and John make all the preparations for the meal. It was going to be a real feast. Seymour saw Jesus and his disciples having a great time. At the end of the meal, Jesus stood up and broke a loaf of bread and gave it to them and said, "This is my body which is given to you. Do this in remembrance of me." Then he gave them a cup of wine and said, "This is God's new covenant, sealed with my blood, which is poured out for you." Seymour saw that the disciples were a little confused. They didn't know what to make of what Jesus was saying. Seymour knew he was telling them he was about to die, and he wanted them to remember him and the things God had done through him. After the meal, some of the disciples went off to visit friends, and some went home. One of the disciples, Judas, went to see the leaders of the temple who had been saying mean things about Jesus. Jesus wanted to go pray, so Peter, James, and John went with him to the garden. Jesus started praying, but Peter, James, and John were really tired and fell asleep. Nearby, Seymour could see Jesus' disciple Judas with a bunch of soldiers, and they were making their way toward the garden. Jesus was finished praying, and he woke up Peter, James, and John. Just then, Judas came up and kissed Jesus, and the soldiers were about to take him away. Peter grabbed a sword and cut off the ear of a soldier. Seymour thought that things were going to get really ugly. But Jesus just reached over and healed the ear of the soldier. The soldiers then took Jesus away. Judas left with a bag of silver coins. Seymour watched as the guards beat Jesus and said mean things to him. The religious leaders condemned Jesus and sent him to the Roman government for sentencing. The Roman governor didn't think Jesus needed to be healed, but the religious leaders kept saying he did. So he handed Jesus over to the religious leaders and the angry mob that was now following them. The crowd was shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" The soldiers beat Jesus and put a wooden cross on his back and made him carry it. Jesus was too weak from the beating, but there was a man named Simon coming into the town, and soldiers made him carry the cross for Jesus. When they got to the top of the hill called Golgotha, two other men who were criminals were also being crucified. One mocked Jesus, and the other asked for forgiveness. Seymour watched as the soldiers gambled for Jesus' clothing. They had placed a sign above Jesus saying, "King of the Jews," and they put a crown of thorns on his head. Seymour could see that Jesus was hurting. Not only had they nailed his hands to the cross, but they also had cut his side. But in all his pain, Jesus asked God to forgive those who were hurting him. As Jesus hung there on the cross, the whole country became black. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out, "Father, into your hands I place my spirit." Then he died. Seymour's point hung really low. How could people make such a big mistake? Didn't they realize just how much Jesus loved them? Then Seymour remembered what Jesus had said, that he would rise again in 3 days. Seymour thought, all of you people just wait till Sunday, and are you going to be surprised? Now when you see Seymour twinkling, you will know he twinkles because Jesus is alive.